Hey there and welcome. Today we are diving into one of the biggest, most confusing, and most amazing journeys any of us ever take, the one from being a kid to becoming an adult. We're talking about adolescence, so let's get right into it.
You ever have that feeling, you're not a little kid anymore, but you definitely don't feel like a full-grown adult either. You're sort of stuck in the middle, navigating all these new feelings and a body that seems to have a mind of its own. Well, that whole experience has a name, and we're about to break down what's really going on. So let's put a label on it. Adolescence. Officially, it's the time when your body goes through all the changes that get it ready for reproductive maturity. It usually kicks off around age 11 and goes all the way up to 18 or 19. And yeah, since that covers the years from 13 to 19, we also call adolescents, you guessed it, teenagers. So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with this strange new chapter, then we'll map out that great growth spurt. After that, we'll uncover the secrets of hormones, understand what it means to be ready for reproduction, and we'll wrap it all up with a handy guide to growing up. All right, let's start at the beginning. Chapter 1, a strange new chapter, where we figure out what kicks this whole journey off. So, the starting gun for all these changes has a name, puberty. And this is super important. Puberty isn't just about growing taller or your voice getting weird. It's the whole package deal, the complete series of developments that makes a person biologically able to have children. It's basically a biological upgrade, and it's not really over until you've reached full reproductive maturity. Okay, now let's get to the part everyone notices, the great growth spurt. We're going to map out all those physical changes that are impossible to miss. Does this sound familiar? 1 minute you're one height, and then bam, all of a sudden your pants are too short? This sudden jump in height is usually the most obvious sign that puberty has started. And what's happening? Well, the long bones in your arms and legs are literally elongating, stretching you taller. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The timing is totally different for boys and girls. Check this out. At age 11, a girl is already at about 88% of her final height, while a boy is still at 81%. So girls get a head start, usually beginning their growth spurt a year or two earlier. But by the time everyone's 18, we all pretty much hit that 100% mark. And this chart just paints the picture perfectly, right? At age 13, you can see girls are way ahead in the height game, hitting 95% of their full growth. Boys are still catching up at 88%. This is exactly why, for a few years in middle school, it feels like all the girls are taller than all the boys. Of course, it's not just about how tall you get, your whole body shape starts to change, and it's different for everyone. For boys, shoulders get broader, chests get wider, and muscles start to show up more. For girls, the area below the waist tends to widen and breasts begin to develop. These are called secondary sexual characteristics. They're basically the physical signs that you're maturing. And oh yeah, the voice. Your voice box, or larynx if you want to be technical, starts to grow. For boys, it gets a lot bigger, which is what makes the voice drop and get deeper. That growth can also create that bump in the throat we call the Adam's apple. And sometimes, while those vocal muscles are figuring things out, you get the famous voice crack. For girls, the larynx grows too, just not as much, so their voices stay in a higher range. Okay, look, with all this stuff happening so fast, it is completely 100% normal to feel a little awkward, a little insecure. Our source material says it perfectly right here, and it's so true. It's all part of that in-between feeling, but you have to remember, there is absolutely no reason to feel insecure. These changes are a totally natural part of growing up that everyone goes through. So what's causing all this chaos? What's the engine driving this whole transformation? Well, let's look under the hood. It's time to talk about hormones, the body's secret messengers. So what in the world are hormones? The easiest way to think about them is like a chemical mail system for your body. They're special substances made by what are called endocrine glands, and they get sent directly into your bloodstream. From there, they travel around until they find their specific target, a body part they have a message for, and then bam, they trigger a change. So let's trace the path of one of these messages. It's like a top secret chain reaction. It all starts in the brain with the pituitary gland. You can think of it as the master gland or mission control. It sends out a signal. That signal travels to the testes in boys or the ovaries in girls. When they get the message, they release the big-time sex hormones, testosterone for boys and estrogen for girls. And those are the messengers that zoom through the body, telling it to grow hair here, deepen your voice there, all the changes of puberty. So this whole complicated, amazing process, it's all building towards one specific biological goal.
And that brings us to our next section, being ready for reproduction. For girls, the reproductive part of life officially kicks off with something called menarche. That's the scientific name for the very first menstrual period. It's a sign that the ovaries are now mature enough to start releasing eggs, which they do about once every month or so. During that cycle, the wall of the uterus gets thicker, just in case a fertilized egg needs a place to grow. If the egg isn't fertilized, that lining isn't needed, so it's shed, and that's what causes the bleeding we call menstruation.
So if we zoom out and look at the whole timeline, it starts with that first period, menarche, somewhere between 10 and 12 years old. It continues with that monthly cycle, and it generally goes on until a woman is about 45 to 50. At that point, the cycle stops for good, and that's a process called menopause. Now, this is some really cool science. How is the sex of a baby even determined? It all comes down to tiny things called chromosomes. A woman has 2 X chromosomes, so every egg she produces has 1 X chromosome. A man has 1 X and 1 Y chromosome, which means his sperm can carry either an X or a Y. So if a sperm with an X fertilizes the egg, you get XX, a girl. If a sperm with a Y fertilizes the egg, you get XY, a boy. Simple as that.
And this scientific fact leads us to a really, really important point. There's an old, harmful myth that the mother is somehow responsible for the sex of her child. But as you can see, that is scientifically impossible. Since the mother can only provide an X chromosome, it is always the father's sperm, and whether it carries an X or a Y, that determines the sex of the baby. The science on this is crystal clear. Okay, so we've covered the what and the why of all these changes. Let's finish up with the how, as in how to navigate this journey in a healthy and happy way. Welcome to your guide to growing up.
Your body is doing some serious construction work right now, which means it needs high-quality building materials. A balanced diet is absolutely key. We're talking proteins to build muscle, iron for healthy blood, and good carbs for energy. And look, chips and snacks are fine once in a while, but they can't replace a real meal. They just don't have the nutrients your growing body is screaming for. Taking care of yourself becomes extra important now, too. Your sweat glands are working overtime, so bathing every day is a really good idea to stay clean and keep infections away. Getting regular exercise, walking, playing sports, whatever you love is fantastic for keeping your body fit. And finally, a really direct and important piece of advice. Say no to drugs. It's just not worth it. They're addictive and they can seriously damage your health and your future happiness. So what have we learned? That adolescence is this wild, pre-programmed, and totally natural journey of change. It's driven by biology and guided by hormones. But while the map is similar for everyone, your personal journey along that path is completely unique to you. So the real question is, now that you know what's going on, how will you use that knowledge to embrace your own path to becoming an adult?